Well, welcome to week 3. You guys finished the homework. Yay! Hopefully. Hopefully you're done with your homework. And those of you that are watching online, hopefully you finished your homework too. And we're ready to what I want to do, I always try to have you study something first so you're familiar with it, and then we can get a little deeper in the text. So that's what we're doing today. And then I've handed you guys next week's homework. So, well, let's begin in prayer, and then we'll jump right in to the text. Father, Lord, how we need you on a regular basis, Father, and I all the more today as we look into Jonah 2 and just want to understand what you have for us, Lord. There's so much application here that unless you and your Spirit affirms with us, we might miss the point. Lord, I thank you for the life of Jonah that he lived before us. I thank you that we can learn so much from this. Father, I pray that you would help us to trust you more, that we would not run from where you want us to go, that we would not be disciplined out of disobedience, but be disciplined by you to just learn more about you, that you do it in protection of us. Father, I pray for each one here that as we go through the text, and that I won't be a stumbling block, Lord, but that your word would come alive in our hearts, and that our desire to know you and understand you more would grow. Lord, you are worthy, you are faithful, and you are trustworthy. Father, I just pray that we would have those thoughts about you, and you're good, that we learn to just trust you no matter what we see with our eyes, that we trust that you've got the big picture that's way more important than anything we're looking at the moment. Father, be with everyone here, everyone that's listening. Father, just help us grow in you. We want your heart. We want to want what you want. We pray all this in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay, Jonah. Hopefully you did your homework. In Jonah 1:17, I just want to finish up, sort of wrap up what we did. In Jonah chapter 1, verse 17, it said, "And then the Lord appointed a great fish to swallow Jonah, and Jonah was in the stomach of the fish for 3 days and 3 nights." That's where we ended last week, where Jonah was, if you remember, he was running away from God, and he didn't want to do what he asked him to do, to go to Nineveh, so he was running as far as he could away. And on the way, they had that terrible storm, and the sailors were like, pray to your God. And he was like, no. And they said, what do we do? And they said, throw you outside. And they're like, no, let's row harder because God's going to get mad at us. And then they finally decided, I guess we're going to have to. And they prayed saying, Lord, please forgive us. We're trying to do what you want us to do. So they throw him off the side. And immediately the storm stopped. And that's when they worshiped God. And they were like, whoa, this was the God of heaven and earth and everything. Jonah, on the other hand, went off the side, and he started to drown and went down, 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 down. So but it ends in Jonah 1, it ends with the Lord appointed a large fish or a great fish. So one, we want to start off there because I want you to notice the Lord appointed. Let me say before that, he appointed a great fish. I've read tons of commentaries, and I've talked to various people, and it seems like everybody thinks the book of Jonah is about a fish. They're all like, well, scientifically, could this have happened? Or, is it this? Is it a whale? Is it this? Is that? It's not about a fish. The book of Jonah, there's 3 times the word fish is used, by the way. And that's in 1:17, in 2:1, and in verse 10 of chapter 2. That's the only time the word fish is used. So the fish is not the big point of the story. The Lord appointed is probably a huge thing, that the Lord himself appointed. You guys might have other things in your versions, but the idea is appointed. He said fish, Now, whether it was something that exists now or whether he created a large fish, it actually could, that word can take that into consideration, that he created a big fish for this purpose to do this. So it really is a moot point of that. But the Lord appointed always points to the Lord's power and accomplishment of his will. The Lord saying, I'm going to make this happen. In 1:17, it shows you that the Lord appointed his sovereignty over all sea creatures. That he was able to take a sea creature and do that. In 4:6, we've got his power over plants. In 4:7, we've got his power over crawling creatures, that worm. In 4:8, we've got power over the wind. We definitely have the sense of that Lord appointed is that sovereign, like he can just make something happen. That's who God is. Now, it's not, and this is where you need to understand, he appointed, it does not say, and it does not mean judgment. Well, you're disobedient, so I'm going to make you swallowed by a fish. And a lot of people think it that way, that it was like judgment, that it was like, the Lord's like going to get him in trouble. But it actually was a place the Lord appointed the fish to swallow him, so there was a place for Jonah's heart to learn. Now, we're going to learn what he learned, but it was a place that Jonah's heart was learned. So 3 days and 3 nights, he's thankful that he didn't drown, but he still has that overall expectance of deliverance is owed to him. But we're gonna get that in the text. So let's look at Jonah chapter 2, verse 1, just that far. Then Jonah prayed to the Lord his God from the stomach of the fish. So this chapter 2, verse 1 is a sort of a turning point in the book. Jonah prayed, and I asked you, where did he pray? Where was he? He was in the belly of the fish. Okay, so where he's praying is interesting. But the prayer that he prayed from the belly of the fish led Jonah to obedience. That's what it did. It led Jonah to obedience. Remember, he wasn't going to obedience. He wasn't going to Nineveh. He was going as far as he could to Tarshish. And being in the belly of the fish taught him and showed him obedience. God showed his mercy toward Jonah, and he gave him time to think and to learn. And said, you're going to be in the belly of the fish for 3 days, and you need to think about this and learn. By the way, chapter 2 is pretty short, isn't it? Do you think he had more to say in 3 days than just 10 verses? Yeah, so he prayed for the belly of the fish, and that's what happened. Now, the irony of this whole prayer, before we get into it, is that Jonah accepts God's mercy and is very thankful, right? Because what does he deserve right now? He's been running from God. Lightning strike, and drown and stay there, He deserves total rejection from God. And God is showing him mercy. And he's thankful for it. But he's still denying the Ninevites mercy. Don't give them mercy. I am owed. Because, I'm a Jew. So I'm owed. But those guys, no. But I really need your mercy. So he'll thankfully accept it himself, but does not want it for anyone else. That's the irony of the book. Well, let's take a look at the prayer a little more in depth, and hopefully you can see some things that hopefully will jump out at you. Okay, so verse 2. And he said, I called out in my distress to the Lord, and he answered me. I cried for help from the depth of Sheol, and you heard my voice. So it starts off with, he called out in his distress, and the Lord answered him. He cried for help, and the Lord heard his voice. And I know you guys did some little mini study on, does the Lord hear your voices all the time? What did you find out? Does the Lord hear all voices all the time? The prayers of the righteous he hears, but he doesn't hear everything. That's right. So just a little side note, that was interesting. But he calls out in his distress. And what you're going to find is that Jonah does see God's sovereignty, and he does see that God is a savior, and he ultimately will acknowledge obedience. But you'll see also that he does not have God's heart. That will not happen in this. So, okay, verse 3. For you had cast me into the deep, into the heart of the sea, and the current engulfed me, and all your breakers and billows passed over me. So I said, I have been expelled from your sight. Nevertheless, I will look again toward your holy temple. Water encompassed me to the point of death. The great deep engulfed me. Weeds were wrapped around my head. I descended to the roots of the mountains. The earth and its bars were around me forever. I'm stopping right there for a second. So, first of all, he says, but you had cast me into the deep. You threw me into the heart of the sea. By the way, who threw him in the part of the sea? Oh. He says, no, God, you did. You threw me in the sea. And he said, I've been expelled from your sight. Nevertheless, I will look toward your holy temple. It's sort of like, even though you have rejected me, I will keep my eyes on you. You're sovereign. So in ways, it's like, it sounds good. I guess the question that I have for you here, and this is the question that you should be dealing with as you go through this, is this a good prayer or is this not a good prayer? It's just an interesting thought. I think you assumed it was probably a good prayer, but I want to go through it. If you're not catching my tone, sometimes you'll be like, oh, she's sort of upset about this. Yeah, I am. So he finds himself going down deep in the sea. He talks about how the water's passing over him, and then the water encompasses him to the point of death. He's in the deep. He's seeing the roots of mountains, so he's at the very, very bottom. The weeds are wrapped around his head, so it's like he's almost being hung, strangled. And and he goes, the earth and the bars were all around me forever. So he really was in a place of no hope, right? He was going down and there was no hope. But the miraculous deliverance, he says, but you have brought up my life from the pit, O Lord my God. So he was drowning, and the Lord appointed a great fish and saved him. And so now he's inside this fish, learning what God might have for him to do. And so he's saying, you saved me from that pit, God. And while I was fainting away, he was almost dying, but not dead, I remembered the Lord. He's focused his attention on the Lord. That remember is an interesting idea in terms of the Lord remembers. You'll find in answering prayers, people remember the Lord. It's like I stopped and I was like, oh yeah, there's the Lord. So he remembers the Lord. And my prayer came to you and into your holy temple. So he's in the belly of the fish, a very uncomfortable place to live, but a great place to learn. And, if you take the time to think about that, it's like, it wouldn't be terribly nice. And it probably would be like, you'd be like sitting up, on a rib or something, going, if I go down there, I'll drown. It really stinks in here. Not any light, 3 days and 3 nights, but he is starting to come to somewhat of his senses. And he says, I prayed, and you remember, I remembered you, and my prayer came to you into your holy temple. So I saw what you did. Let me stop right there for just a second and look at something for just a moment. When this is not this text now, we're going to take a step out, because he says, I go to your temple. And I just want you to be aware, as a believer, when Jesus died, something miraculous happened. When he died, when he was dying, they said, and when he finally died, it says the curtain was torn in two. You've heard that before, right? The curtain was torn in two. Well, that might not mean a lot to you. I want it to mean a lot to you. It should mean a lot to you. That curtain, the way the temple was set up, people would go to the temple to talk to the Lord. That makes sense. You go to the temple and talk to the Lord. First thing, what would you hit? You would hit the altar. You'd bring your sacrifice. Why would your sacrifice? To pay for your sins, right? Then they would go into the temple, and inside, only the priest could go in, and there was a table of showbread. So it's a table of bread. There was a lamp that was continually lit for talking about, so it's like there's a table of incense before that curtain. A lot of things that would be worship things before we'd get to inside. But then there was the curtain, and inside, past the curtain, was the Ark of the Covenant. That was where God would sit, if that makes sense. So now you'd only go past that curtain into where that ark was only once a year. And that was only the high priest at that time would be the only one that would go beyond the curtain in that area. And he was supposed to bring the sacrifice in and sprinkle the blood on the Ark of the Covenant, so that when the Lord looked down, and do you know what was in the Ark of the Covenant? It's a box. Who is it? Somebody calls it a box. It's your husband. That's why he was like, the box. I'm like, well, it sort of is, but anyway, the box. Okay, what was in that ark? The tablets of the Ten Commandments. So when he would look down, if he would look down at the law, and he would say, oh man, these guys are not obeying, but he would look and see the blood that was shed, and then he'd be like, okay, I will, and that's why it's called the blood of atonement, which is a covering. It would cover over their sins. So it'd be like, okay, this year, I will not destroy you, type thing. That's the idea of it. So the high priest would go in once a year. He would put bells in his clothes, and he would have a rope tied around his waist. So if the bells stopped ringing, they would know to pull him out with the rope, because God didn't accept the sacrifice, and he's toast. So every year, you can imagine that people would be very, very quiet while he's in there until it's done. And then when he come out, it'd be like, oh, yeah, okay, we're okay, type thing. That curtain separated everybody else from going into the Holy of Holies, right? That curtain was so thick that a team of horses could not tear it apart. It was, the curtain was thick. It was like a wall. And it was torn in two, not top to bottom, but bottom to top. It's a miracle that it happened. There's no way it could have happened. When he died, that curtain was torn in two. Now, why do you think the curtain was torn in two? totally paid for. We don't need it anymore. And guess what? We can now go where? We can go right in there. When you pray, you actually go right in there to that Holy of Holies. And sometimes I'm thinking, Lord, my fingernail broke. And then I'm like, what am I doing? I'm in the Holy of Holies, and here I am talking about my fingernail, But at the same time, he sees us as little children, and he allows us to do that, and he allows us to come in. What a privilege prayer is. And we should see that every time we pray as going right into that Holy of Holies. Well, going back to Jonah, that's something I just want you to think about when you pray. But going back to Jonah, he said his prayer came to him when he was into the holy temple. If Jonah's in the belly of the fish, how can he be in the holy temple? How can you be in the Holy of Holies? In your heart. In his heart, he was saying, I was there. When I'm in the Holy of Holies, he's saying, I went to the temple. I went to where God was. That's what he's saying. Now, the sad thing is what he continues to say. But anyway, I just want you guys to be aware of when you pray, that's what you're actually doing, is going into the holy temple, into the Holy of Holies. Then verse 8 and 9 is the dead giveaway. He basically says, look at me compared to them. He says, those who regard vain idols and forsake your faithfulness, like those Ninevites, versus me, us, the Jews, those who regard vain idols, who abandon their loyalty to God and forfeit his grace. I say that because I read it in a commentary and I was like, wow, that is a great statement. They abandoned their loyalty to God and forfeit his grace. Before we go on to what Jonah's doing, I just want us to realize that we live in a time where we might not have idols. You might not have a golden calf that you go in your bedroom and worship. You might not, some cultures do where they have little statues or whatever. And you might say, I don't have idols. I don't do that. But anything that replaces God can be an idol. So an idol doesn't have to be a physical thing. It can be your kids. It can be your marriage. It can be your dreams, your hopes. It can be a job. It can be on and on and on. Your sport. I've seen it all. I know I haven't seen it all, but I've seen a lot. Idols are anything that replaces God. And he is correct, when you regard, when you make something important a vain idol, a worthless, vain means it's vapor, it's not of any value. You abandon your loyalty to God and you forfeit his grace. Does that make sense? You say, the most important thing in my life is my kids. And I'm sorry, God, my kids are more important than you right now. And so because of that, you know what? I'm just going to stay focused on them and not you. You abandon God and you forfeit his grace that he has planned for you. Now, I do this all the time. I'll take my kids, for example. I love my kids. Anybody that knows me knows I love my kids. And I really wish I was around them a lot. And I wish I could. But if I abandon what God's called me to do, which is be here by the side of my husband, here, then I would forfeit his grace, because I'd say, no, Lord, I don't want to do what you want me to do. I want to do what I want to do because I think that's better. Now, what's the best? God's ways or my ways? You guys all go, obviously, God's ways. I think if I was with them, like if I was with my daughter every day, then I could help her homeschool, I could help her this, I could help her that, I could help her do all these things. And the reality is, maybe I couldn't do any of those things, right? I could be right by her, maybe not be able to do any of them. But I'm forfeiting what God has planned for me of blessings being here today. And so I forfeit that. And I'm like, you know what, God? It doesn't really matter if you're planning on using... Sorry, I'm needing more liquid. If you were planning on using something that I have in my head to help somebody else, no, that's not important. What's important is for me to be sitting by the phone waiting for my daughter, you know? It's like, no, you start going, Carol, you're forfeiting what you could have gotten. Does that... This whole, if I have to summarize, and I'll keep summarizing it again and again, Jonah was saying, God, in my eyes, the Ninevites are not worth saving. They are not worth getting mercy. They are not even worth telling them they're going to be destroyed. They're not worth it. But me hanging out with my Jewish friends and in Israel, even though I know we're not following the Lord very well, I'm sorry, but we're owed it, so you'll take care of us either way. I want to stay here. What was he forfeiting? The opportunity to see God at work. He's about to do something incredible, and Jonah's going to miss it. On top of that, you'll find that Jonah sort of is going to get bitter. We'll find that later on in the story too, but now I just gave you the conclusion of the day, but we'll go back to it. So here he is saying, you know, those people over there, they regard vain idols, not me. They forsake your faithfulness, not me. But you know what? If you want me to obey, I will sacrifice to you because I am a Jew, and I'll do it with thanksgiving. Now you say, why are you getting that tone, Carol? Because everything about this has that tone. And that which I vowed, what did he vow? I will pay. Salvation is from the Lord, he says. Some people say, well, why did we memorize that verse? Salvation is from the Lord. Because that's a truth, right? Salvation is from the Lord. It's because where it's located it's a truth that's in amongst not so great. If that makes sense. So salvation is from the Lord. That is correct. The only salvation you're ever going to get is from the Lord. And he says, that which I vowed, I promised that I would obey you. I promised that I'm going to be your servant. I am your slave. I will do what you want. So he's saying, I will obey you, that which I vowed. The reason why I say this, and you're like, why are you reading into the text? Because of chapter 3. Which immediately says, then God says, go do it. And he was like, okay. He immediately went. Why are you saying that he has a bad attitude? Because of chapter 3 and 4. So I am reading ahead into this prayer. But because we're looking at prayer, I want you to see what's actually happening. He is implying that, you know, because the Ninevites would regard vain idols. They would forsake God. They are forsaking God. He's supposed to go tell them, you're forsaking God, and you're worshiping idols. He goes, but here's his change, but I will sacrifice to you. I'm different than them. And I will do it with thanksgiving, because I'm very thankful that you showed mercy to me. And that's which I vowed, I will pay, because I will go. I mean, he ends up in chapter 4, just to remind you again, in chapter 4, when God finally does relent and save them, he's mad. It says, chapter 4, he was greatly displeased, and he was angry, and he prayed, and he said, Lord, this is exactly what I thought. I knew you were gracious and compassionate, slow to anger, abundant in loving kindness, and one who relents in calamity. I knew you were going to save him. I didn't want to come. And you did exactly what I thought you would. And he's like going, you know what? Don't. He's trying in his last hearted prayer is to say, please don't save them. They're not worth it. But I am. So what can we learn from chapter 2? There's a lot to learn here. But why does Jonah not get it? He really doesn't have God's heart. He has what he sees. What he sees is Nineveh is a wicked place. Assyria is a wicked place. They do not deserve your love, Lord. They don't. But me and Israel, oh yeah, we're owed. We need this. We need to be cautious and not be like Jonah. Jonah ends up bitter. He obeys God, because, by the way, that's what ends up happening in this. Jonah gets schooled. Jonah gets disciplined. If you want to take the Hebrews verse, he gets disciplined. He could have let him drown, but instead he was like, no, this is a time for you to learn, Jonah. And so he appoints the fish, and the fish gets him and protects them. And we can learn in the very last verse, it says in verse 10, then the Lord commanded the fish, again, the Lord appointed the fish, now the Lord commands the fish to what? Vomit. That's a disgusting term. He could have just said, place him on the thing. He said, vomit. He said, vomit him out onto the dry land. What do you think God's thinking about Jonah right now? I'll spit you out. Now go obey. But often we take this as this is God's judgment of Jonah. You really don't understand God's judgment, because God's judgment is really intense. It's the lake of fire. It's eternal. This is God's discipline of Jonah. It gives him 3 days and 3 nights to get his act together, to say, what are you thinking? You're thinking wrongly, Jonah. And Jonah finally comes to the conclusion, well, the Ninevites aren't worth saving, but I did vow to obey you, and so I guess I will. So how did Jonah get here? How did Jonah get to a point where he finally had to be swallowed by a fish to obey? And it just comes from a combination of a bunch of things. But self-righteousness is one that you see that here. A sense of I'm owed, I'm a Christian, I go to church every week, I read my Bible, you owe me, God. What does God owe you? Feeling of self-importance. That's self-righteous, same thing. So God doesn't owe you anything. Secondly, he's looking at the world through his own eyes. And I can understand that. God did show himself through the Israelites. God did say, I'm going to save these stiff-necked people. He did do that. But he's seeing himself as saying, so therefore we're wonderful, and look how horrible they are. I mean, they're way worse than we are. And he's missing that God is the merciful one. God is doing something. You're about to see God do something absolutely amazing. He is going to save a nation for a generation that was not following him at all. And you're later on you'll see when we get to chapter 4, so you want to stay to chapter 4, which is only another lesson or two. In chapter 4, I'll tell you why it's really amazing that he did this. But for now, let's do some application to ourselves of when we don't trust the Lord, we aren't willing to just flat out obey. We tend to look at it through the world through our eyes. We make our own judgments. And we say, you know what, Lord, that's a bad idea. No, that's a bad idea. This is a much better idea. You're wrong, God. You messed up, God. Here's the good idea. Matter of fact, you're the one that threw me into the sea. You're the cause of all these problems. If I think about your sovereignty, the more I think about it, you're the guilty one. I'm the innocent one. man, you will live a life of bitterness. Jonah's prayer is not what we want to emulate. He doesn't have God's heart. And as I said, he doesn't even see God's truth, and that he blames God in verse 3. He's self-righteous, and all that happens in this time that he's being schooled is that he's just not willing to obey. In verse 17 and 2:10, we find out that God set up a schoolroom for him, and in the belly of the fish, but not to change his heart, because it didn't work. Right? In 2:8, it didn't change his heart for the Ninevites, but it did get Jonah to obey. It did change his heart and will obey. And so the fish was neither salvation or judgment. The fish was a schoolroom. And Jonah knew what God wanted him to do ahead of time. It wasn't like he was like, I don't even know what you want, Lord. No. He knew. And this is where I'll challenge you. If you know that God's wanting you to do something, it's really stupid to run. Because God will get his way. Now, sometimes you don't know. That's a whole different scenario. But Jonah knew what he was supposed to do. God didn't deliver Jonah so that because he was righteous. God delivered Jonah so that he would obey. That's why he delivered him. Jonah never cared to know what God's heart is. And you know, there's a verse in the Bible that talks about David is a man after God's own heart. And he wanted to know who God was. Moses wanted to know God's own heart. Jonah wanted God to be on his side. And that might help in your prayers. Are you trying to get yourself to understand what God's heart is in your prayer? Or are you trying to say, God, you're messed up. You need to get where I am. Because I know what's right. And that's where you'd say, that's where you're at danger of becoming Jonah and becoming bitter. Because you're not going to get your way. God's going to get his way every time. And by the way, praise the Lord, he does. Because his way is right. It's good. In the end, we'll all go, this is great. You are so wise. But at the moment, we'll be saying, no, I'm not getting my way. And that's what's happening with Jonah. Running from God, if you do that, and you are a believer, and if he loves you, he's going to school you. He's going to discipline you. A lot of times people run from God because they don't want to be in their marriage anymore. They want to be delivered. It's like, I don't care what happens, God. I just want to get out of this marriage. A lot of them they run away from God, and they just say, I want this job. I need this job more than I need time with fellowship with people. I need this job over the church. Or some will say, I need my children. I need my kids to be a certain thing. And if you want deliverance from, and then what happens is there's pain in those choices. Does that make sense? Like things don't work out. And then you're like upset with God because they didn't work out to your plan when you were running all the time. It's like, man, I ended up in a belly of a fish. It's like, Lord, save me from the belly of a fish. It's like, well, you're the one that threw yourself in there. It's like, that's why you got there. God's going to discipline you if he loves you, if you're running from him. So that'll be like Jonah. But if you strive after God's own heart, if you're saying, Lord, I want your heart. Let me give you some examples of that. Solomon, when he prayed, what did he pray for? Did he pray for riches and wealth and long life? And what did he pray for? Wisdom. Why? Because you're asking me to rule these people and I don't know how to do it. And God says, that's my heart. And you know what? He blessed him with wisdom, but he also blessed him with what? Long life, riches, all the other things that people would say he want. The disciples. Sometimes you can go into tough times, and I want to use this as an example because I think a lot of times you could take this and say, well, every time I'm in a tough time, it must be because I'm being disciplined because I'm running from God. That is not true. He disciplines for a lot of reasons. So the disciples at one point in time were with the crowd, and the crowd was saying, we want to make Jesus king. Well, it wasn't his time. He had to die on the cross. So he's like, no, you're not going to make me king. And the disciples are all like, this is going to be great. This is going to be great. He's going to be king, and we're going to have the kingdom right now, and this will be wonderful. Not, to be honest with you, not thinking of any of us, because we wouldn't have been included in the kingdom. But at the time, they were thinking, this sounds great. This is going to be great. And so then they're like, let's make him king. And Jesus says, you know what? Get into the boat and row. So they got into the boat and they rowed out in the middle of Galilee. They were going to go to the other side. And this huge storm came up. And they couldn't go to the right or the left or back or forward. They were just stuck, just trying to stay alive. Now, they could easily say, what is this? What did we do wrong? Did they do anything wrong? No. God said, this is the safest place for you in the middle of the storm. Why? They can't get back on land with all the people that are saying, let's make him king. They can't, it's like, I'm going to protect you from doing what you shouldn't do, and I'm going to put you in a storm, but it's actually to protect you so you can't go anywhere. So not all storms are there to just cause you to be swallowed by, not all fish are there, your fishes in life or whatever, are caused because of discipline. Sometimes they're caused to protect you. Sometimes they're caused to just have you learn something and grow. But let me check the time. Okay, I'll do a real quick one. David and Shimei. King David was the king. His son Absalom was rebelling against him. It's a long story. It was an after effect of what happened with Bathsheba. That his son that the whole thing ended up happening. He wasn't parenting right, and a lot of things happened. And so now David is literally escaping his kingdom, letting Absalom come in, and he's on his way out, with his head held low, and all of his people that are following him, going, man, we're leaving the king, we're leaving the temple and everything, going away. And there was a guy by the name of Shimei that came up and started throwing rocks at David and cursing at him and saying, you deserve this. You deserve this because of what you did with Saul, which is not true of that. But David did know what happened with Bathsheba, and that it said one of the consequences was his children were going to rebel, and this is happening. So David did know that it was because he wasn't trusting God. He was there. But Shimei's throwing rocks, and one of the guys, these mighty men, and the mighty men were tough guys, and they were like, David, let me go take care of this dead dog, I'll solve that real quick. We don't have to take this. And David said, no, let him go on. I love to hear this, because David says, let him say what he says. Let's see if I can find it really quick here. This is extra because I wasn't planning on it. I thought about it, and then I thought, I won't do it. Now I'm doing it. But he says to Shimei, they say, let's go take care of him. He shouldn't be cursing the king like this. And David says to his servant, his guy, his mighty man, he said, behold, my son who came out to seek my life, that's Absalom, how much more this Benjamite, it's like he's trying to seek my life too. Let him alone, let him curse, for the Lord has told him, perhaps the Lord will look upon my affliction and return good to me instead of cursing this day. Perhaps the Lord will look on my affliction and return good to me instead of cursing this day. He's saying, you know what? It's okay. I deserve this. He goes, I'm not going to try to take revenge on that. I deserve this. But who knows? Perhaps the Lord will turn this to good, is essentially what he's saying. That's a person that's saying, I know I'm being disciplined, and it's okay. And I'll wait to see God's goodness. So there's times when you're being disciplined and going through a tough time, like the disciples in the lake, where they did nothing. They weren't doing anything wrong, but God did it to protect them. Sometimes he's doing it to say, do you have my heart? Like David. And David says, you know what? I'll wait for God's goodness. And then other times he's saying, you are going to obey whether you like it or not, and here you go, that's Jonah. So I say sometimes, I smile when people say, oh, I'm going through this trial for this specific reason. Are you that sure? Is it really obvious? I mean, I can assure you Jonah knew what was going on. So if you know, well, I'm getting this, I got swallowed by a fish because I'm walking away from my family. It's like, oh, well, yeah, okay, well, let's just hope for God's goodness, and let's go back to trusting in the Lord that sooner or later we'll see his goodness, but we need to obey, You sort of have to assess your life with the Lord and say, where's my heart? Is my heart toward the Lord? Or am I running? Or is he protecting me? Or is he trying to teach me something? Or there's a million reasons for trials. But so I don't want you to think that all trials are there out of discipline. But no trial is there out of judgment. Because judgment is the lake of fire. So tough times in this world is not judgment. Even David he's just saying, I deserve this difficult time, but I'm looking for seeing God's goodness. So if you strive after God's own heart, you won't be tempted to fall into bitterness as Jonah did. You will tend to want to say, I'm striving after God's own heart. I'm willing to obey even at my hurt. Why? Because it isn't my hurt. It's just a temporary hurt. I know it'll be good. That's knowing God's heart. But when you're saying, no, okay, fine, I'll obey, but you're stupid, God. You're going to be bitter. You're going to be bitter, and that's what we're going to find with the rest of Jonah, is you're going to find that he is just bitter, that God keeps giving him loving kindness, and he is just bitter and doesn't enjoy anything about this life. Jonah thought that his prayer was for deliverance, but God actually used that time in the belly of the fish just to get Jonah to obey. He didn't learn God's heart. So what are we supposed to summarize from this? Strive to know the Lord. Know that his ways are always right. If he's asking you to wait, it's for a good reason. If you're asked to be in the middle of a storm and wait, it's for a good reason. He's there with you. If you run from God, that is a very bad idea. It's a very bad idea. He might get you there, but you still might never learn his heart. The general idea is the righteous shall live by faith. That's the truth. The righteous will live by faith. Faith means we don't always know what it's supposed to look like. If I had a pen and could write out my life, I would have said, well, first of all, and I've told you guys this, first of all, I would have married this guy. And I tell you right now, oh, praise the Lord, you didn't listen to that prayer. It would have been horrible. I would have said first, okay, so he didn't give me that dream. Okay, so then I would keep writing and say, okay, well now, this. Okay, now I want money. Now I want this. Now I want that. Now I want this, And I would have written out this whole life, but it wouldn't have been the best one that God had planned. He has things that are way bigger than we ever imagined, have way more impact than we ever imagined. What are we doing fighting him and complaining about him and giving him a hard time? Yes, he is sovereign, but he's good and he's trustworthy and he's worth it. Jonah is missing that. right? Jonah's saying, no, God, I got a better plan. No, God, it's you know what? It's a bad idea to go to the Ninevites, and it's a really bad idea if you save them. But it's a great idea for you to give me mercy. I'm really thankful for your mercy for me, but don't give it to them. We don't want to be like Jonah. We want to have the heart of God saying, Lord, if you want to have mercy on my enemy, may it be, how can I help you? How can I not be a stumbling block to your plans? I want your heart. That's what we want to strive for. That's what you don't see in chapter 2 in the prayers. That's what, if you get that out of chapter 2, then you're starting to grasp chapter 2. And then we'll go on to 3 and 4 next week. 3 and 4, 3 next week, and then 4. And then you'll find out the outcome of, if you can wait 2 more weeks. Next week we'll read 3, and 4 I'll give you the ultimate outcome of why we look back on this and we go, wow, God was really wise. But Jonah doesn't see it. But he does obey. God does get him to obey out of appointing a fish and throwing him up on the sea, on the land. So, all right, let's close in prayer. Lord, I just thank you again for Jonah. I thank you that you keep giving us more and more examples to challenge our own hearts, to learn to want to have a heart after you, a heart that to want what you want and not what we want, to realize that we have such a small understanding of the world and even of our own lives. Father, I pray that you would continue to deliver us, because salvation is from you. We can't do anything to save ourselves. Lord, and I just again reminded of what it says in Jude, that now to him who is able to keep you from stumbling, you are able to keep us from stumbling, to make us stand in the presence of his glory, blameless with great joy. You can make us stand in front of God in the Holy of Holies. To the only God our Savior, through Jesus Christ our Lord, be glory, majesty, dominion, and authority before all time, now and forever. Amen.